Shabbat Shalom. This morning I have some good news and some bad news. I'll do the good news first, and then finally, by the way, after the bad news, I'll suggest some more good news, or at least a way to create some good news maybe for our future. So the good news is that we're finally coming out of our year and a half of hibernation. The pandemic that has shut down the economic and social lives of people all over the planet is finally starting to retreat. Here in the United States, the numbers of new COVID cases are declining rapidly, thanks to the manufacturing and distribution of various vaccines to hundreds of millions of Americans in a really short period of time. This is truly a miracle of modern science, as we all know. In a matter of mere months, scientists developed vaccines for this new disease, tested it, and ramped up the manufacturing of billions of doses of them at an extraordinary speed. We're certainly not out of the woods yet, but on the whole, certainly in this country, we have good news. And we can see that today, right here, by the number of people that are in our sanctuary, and I also was in the chapel in the Museum Minion. We have people coming back in all our venues, and it's great to see our family and friends again, live and in person. And this is a blessing that we should not take for granted, and that we should all be very grateful for. That is really, truly wonderful good news. The bad news is, as we're all painfully aware, we have become a very polarized society. Not just here in the United States, but really in other countries around the world as well. Perhaps because of social media that has encouraged us to seek out like-minded people to reconfirm our own beliefs, we no longer need to pay attention to people who have different opinions. Partly, I think, because of our hyper-speed society that's tried to reduce complex problems to sound bites. Not just sound bites, microbites. A word or two is used to try and capture a very complex and thorny issue. And even worse, the word or phrase seems almost intentionally designed by marketing wizards to grab your attention and pump up your adrenaline. Phrases like defund the police, or critical race theory, or systemic racism, or cancel culture, or climate change. Each of these phrases is trying to capture a very real problem, but by oversimplifying the problem, perhaps for marketing reasons, the phrases get bandied about by one side or the other as weapons in a war of words. And neither side ends up really listening to the very real underlying fears and concerns of the other. It's no wonder we cannot seem to agree on anything. We aren't really listening to each other anymore, unless we're listening to somebody who already agrees with us, which, as I said, is all too easy to do these days. But the result is we can't seem to solve the very real underlying problems that we know we face. So that's the bad news. We're a terribly divided society that seems paralyzed and incapable of addressing the very real problems we know we face. Our Torah portion, interestingly, focuses on a biblical example of a very similar situation. The Israelites know that they're going to have to go to battle to conquer the land that God has promised them. And they're afraid. They're terrified. They're afraid of the unknown. Who are they up against? How powerful is the army? What are their fortifications and weapons like? These are very real and understandable fears. And their solution is logical. Send out spies, one from each tribe, to investigate the land and report back their findings. But as we know, there's a deep division in the reports that are brought back by the spies. 10 of the spies say, the land is indeed as Moses described. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. It's rich in natural resources. In fact, here's a big bunch of grapes that we brought back. Look at how enormous those grapes are. But the land is full of giants. These people are enormous. We look like insects. We look like bugs compared to them. And they will surely squash us like bugs if we try to conquer the land. Better we should go back to Egypt and become slaves to the Egyptians than go out and do battle against those giants. As we know, 2 of the spies, Joshua and Caleb, try to calm everyone down. Come on, guys. Remember, God is with us. We can do this. Don't you remember the 10 plagues in Egypt, parting of the Red Sea? Have some faith. 10 spies focused on fear. The other 2 focused on faith. But no one listened to the 2 spies offering hope and faith, and so God had finally had enough. This generation that refused to even try to conquer the land will wander around in the wilderness for 40 years until they've all died off, and their children will then go in to conquer the land. So the Torah presents us with the story of our people terrified by a very real looming threat, the giants of the land and their fortified cities. And they are deeply divided about how to respond to this threat, ultimately paralyzing themselves and being incapable of confronting the problem. And then comes the next chapter, chapter 15 in the book of Numbers. And this chapter poses 2 puzzles that, as my teacher Reuven Hammer once suggested, may provide us a solution for our problems today. The first part of the chapter says, when you enter the land that I'm going to give you to settle in, and then it proceeds to outline various offerings that can be given to God to give thanks for the land, or other sacrifices that can be offered when somebody does something wrong and they want to fix their relationship with God. But wait a minute. What does God mean by saying, when you enter the land? Just the last chapter, he said, these people will never enter the land. So is God just taunting them? Is he shaming them? Here's something you're never going to get to do, nya. Or perhaps God is trying to give them hope for a future, if not for them, at least for their children. You yourselves may not actually enter the land, but your children will. And when they do, here are some things that they can do to show their gratitude for the wonderful new home. I'm going to be with you for the 40 years of wandering in the desert, and I'm going to be with your children when they enter the land. Do not give up all hope just because you will not fulfill the dream yourselves. Your dream will become a reality for your children. Persevere, have faith, trust yourselves and your children. You can always fix the mistakes you have made. And then the last part of the chapter is the commandment to wear fringes on the corners of our garments, like this talit. It's the 3rd paragraph of the Shema that we recite twice a day. But here too is a subtle hint, perhaps, that God may be taunting the Israelites. Very subtle, so pay attention. At first glance, this paragraph seems to fit well with the other 2 paragraphs of the Shema. Each paragraph provides us with mnemonic devices, memory devices, that remind us of God's commandments. In the 1st and 2nd paragraphs, we have the tefillin, the boxes we put on our foreheads and on our arms to remind us, keep in our thoughts and our actions, God's commandments. We put mezuzahs on the doorposts of our house, so when we go out and we come home, we're reminded of God's commandments. When we lie down and we rise up, we speak about the oneness of God and to have love for our Creator all day long. All of these are designed to inspire loyalty for the commandments that God has given us. And the 3rd paragraph seems to provide another mnemonic device. Put fringes on the corners of your garments so that you'll remember God's commandments and you'll keep them. But there's an unusual verb that's used in this 3rd paragraph, so I want to point this out to you. It says, you shall look at the fringe and recall all the commandments of Adonai and observe them so that you will not follow after your heart and your eyes. And the Hebrew verb for follow after your heart and your eyes is lo taturu, acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem. That verb, tatur, is the very same verb used 5 times to describe what the 12 spies were supposed to do, to go out and check out the land. Surely that's not a coincidence. So again, maybe God is taunting the Israelites, saying, since you went out to explore the land and you saw what your eyes wanted to see instead of what was really there, I'm now commanding you to look at these fringes to remind yourselves of that grave mistake you made when you wandered after your own eyes. Look at these fringes and weep, because this is what prevented you from getting into the land. Or, again, maybe God is offering the Israelites hope. Look at these fringes and remind yourself of my commandments. And also remind yourselves, as the last sentence of the paragraph says, that God took you out of slavery in Egypt. God is always with you. He's inspiring you with courage and hope for a better future. You can overcome the obstacles in your way if you have faith in yourselves and faith in your Creator. So to summarize then, the good news is we're on the road to recovery from this pandemic. The bad news is we still have terrible division in our society over issues of racial justice and equity, freedom of speech, safety and security in our neighborhoods, a changing climate, and other issues. These are like the giants our ancestors saw in the land of Israel. They can terrify us and paralyze us into inaction, or worse, we can cause us to retreat and pretend that life will be better in some imagined past. Or we can look at the fringes on our talit, the mezuzahs on the doorposts, the boxes on our foreheads and our arms, constantly reminding us that God is with us. God is reaching out to us to inspire us with wisdom and to inspire us with courage and hope, and commands us to create a society in which we all learn to listen to each other, to love our neighbors as ourselves, to understand the fears of our neighbors and also our own fears, and to forge a path together that will enable us to overcome those fears and create a better world for everyone. So let's not allow ourselves to be distracted and agitated by the slogans and sound bites of marketing agents that seek to polarize us. Let's not get overwhelmed by the social media algorithms that confirm our own biases. If we engage in honest conversations about our own fears, and we earnestly listen to the concerns of our neighbors, we ought to be able to achieve solutions to our problems so that we can conquer the giants of our own day and not be terrified by them. As Moses instructed Joshua, chazak ve'ematz, be strong and courageous. And with God's help, we can do this. Shabbat shalom.